Well, here we go. Welcome to today's Edge Computing Association webinar, Projections 2021. My name is Paul Barker, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of ECA, your Edge Computing News Resource and Information Forum. Well, let's get started. In terms of overall projections, they're coming in fast and furious as tumultuous 2020 comes to an end. According to research firm IDC, this year's predictions are shaped by the disruptive forces of the COVID-19 pandemic, which will dramatically alter the global business ecosystem for the next 12 to 24 months and beyond. The impacts from COVID-19, it pointed out, are ubiquitous and affect the many external forces that are driving change. Yet, despite the disruptions caused by the global pandemic in 2020, the global economy remains on its way to its digital destiny, as most products and services are based on a digital delivery model or require digital augmentation to remain competitive. Gartner, meanwhile, in a recent survey, pointed out that even with the negative impact COVID-19 is having on every sector, 47% of organizations plan to increase their investments in the Internet of Things. Following the COVID-19 lockdown, the survey found that 35% of organizations reduced their investment in IoT, while a large number of organizations are planning to invest more in IoT implementations to reduce costs. And that's word from two consultancies, and our speakers today are Tom Ward, Vice President of Marketing at QNext Corporation, Paul Lewis, Global Chief Technology Officer and ECA contributor, I might add, and Montu Chadha, Founder and CEO of Nitorum Inc. and Applications on Networks, otherwise known as AppsNet. Before introducing them, one housekeeping note: you can submit your questions by clicking on the search button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those a little later. First, I'll read out the bios of each. Tom is a 30-year technology veteran who was a founding employee of ATI Technologies, Inc., and holds an MBA from the Schulich School of Business at York University. With extensive experience in both large multinational companies such as NEC and Celestica, and small entrepreneurial startups such as ATI Technologies, MGI Software, and QNext. Tom is a senior marketing executive with an extensive experience motivating and leading teams and successfully developing global distribution channels. As a global CTO, Paul is passionate about leading technology evangelism, client executive advocacy, and technological and business strategy, especially related to digital transformation and social innovation through his career as CTO and senior executive technologist of several multi-vertical organizations. They range from startups to large business service providers. He is also a regular contributor to ECA. Montu is a successful entrepreneur with two businesses to his credit. He is the CEO and founder of Nitorum Inc., a SaaS-based software platform that simplifies the monitoring of all things connected to the internet. Nito has an international client base in both the private and public sectors. Montu is also the president of AppsNet, a cloud and managed IT service and solutions firm that supports the technology needs of small and medium-sized businesses across Canada. In light of the above predictions, each of you specialize in different sectors of the IT sector. What key trends do you see occurring over the next 12 months? Montu, let's start with you, and then hear next from Paul and then from Tom. I'm going to suggest that each speaker keep it to a maximum of 10 minutes. So over to you, Montu.
Fair enough. Thank you everyone for lending in here. And it's a privilege to be here along with Tom Ward and Paul Lewis. As you've mentioned, I'm the president of Applications on Networks. It's a managed services and solutions company in the small and mid-market space, and we deal with solutions including cloud services, management, monitoring, both big and small. What we're seeing and experiencing is something you likely know and it's something pretty obvious. It's a considerable growth in the cloud adoption and work from home. That is the remote worker. Our second endeavor, which is from Nitto Realm, it's a product called Nitto. It's a completely different solution than an MSP space that we're in, and it helps keep an eye on infrastructure, again, big and small. We are seeing a lot more demand for infrastructure monitoring, including Internet of Things, because there's much more decentralization. People still need to know what's going on, whether it's on-premise, whether it's on the cloud, or whether it's on the edge, or moving between them, or even sitting at home. Now, COVID-19, we can't start a talk without talking about COVID-19, unfortunately. Yeah, but the practicalities of COVID-19 has rushed companies into cloud adoption, mostly because of the need to find solutions for the remote worker. So what's happened is lots of companies had solutions, but quite a few of them were left behind, either because of capacity or because of capability. And the companies that had successful transformations during this time, well, most of them, their transitions weren't adequately planned. There wasn't enough time. So putting some thought into this, I think that 2021 overall is going to be a year to fix mistakes made during this time of deploying architecture and infrastructure in rushed mode. And I think the second biggest thing, which everybody would have already been seeing, is security, because everybody had to move so fast during this time. So in that context, I was thinking about a few things that we've been coming across, and that maybe 2021 is going to be a starting point to, or more adoption of. And the first place that I think we're going to be is, it's going to be about managing the complexity that the cloud brings to us. Both just the complexity, but also costs associated with the complexity. I don't think anybody would doubt that cloud adoption is right now at an all-time high. The number of adoptions and the number of options available in the marketplace is growing. The number of solutions are growing, and those solutions have gone from being just simple cloud adoption to adopting cloud in the multi-cloud environment. So to be able to have hybrid cloud infrastructures, multiple cloud infrastructures, and span those infrastructures across the globe is something that's going to grow in 2021. And the only thing that's going to add to those headaches is that a lot of people still have private clouds, and they need to integrate with those environments. So the options that are available over there are going to be about cost management, infrastructure management, and we're seeing these issues pop up. In our daily work, we're seeing these issues pop up where infrastructure has been deployed, and we have to talk about licensing issues, issues about too much CPU power, too little CPU power, how to grow it automatically, and how to pay for it on a continual basis, because that model of having predicted payments for businesses, which is one of the key factors, has become difficult to manage with cloud infrastructures. As a managed services and solution provider, this is what we're expecting for 2021. But we're also expecting this to be an opportunity for us in order to share our management experience and our expertise in the cloud infrastructure area. Now, the second thing, which is really important, is cybersecurity. Everybody this year has seen a cybersecurity increase. The increase in the remote workforce because of COVID-19 has escalated the need to secure this infrastructure. Employees accessing the cloud-based collaboration tools, applications have expanded the corporate network. They've expanded it all the way from the corporate home down to the individual home. And the individual home doesn't have the same control. It's just people, unfortunately, don't pay enough attention to the security in the home environment. Now the corporation is sort of moved into it. I saw a very funny cartoon the other day, which was about do I live at work or do I work at home? It's become that kind of world right now. And so for 2020, what we saw was a refocusing of efforts, concentrating on security. I think 2021 will be about deploying extended solutions, better anti-malware, better detection and response, more efficient prevention and management in security area. I think we're going to have more ubiquitous second factor authentication, 2FA. There's companies that still lack that adoption properly. I'm hoping to see firewalls in the homes and not the routers that people just get from their ISPs. I think secure Wi-Fi is going to be a big thing with the Wi-Fi 6 and AX coming along. I know that file sharing and content sharing has become very important for corporations that are now dispersed and decentralized everywhere. And while it's efficient to have that content everywhere, it's very hard for companies to keep an eye on it and protect that content. And so I'm thinking that 2021 will bring better security around file sharing, content sharing, etc. in those areas. Moving on to, no talk will be complete without talking about AI these days. So AI is, in my opinion, gives humans the ability to gather very large amount of data and make sense of it all, which otherwise comprehending that data by any one individual would be too difficult. Cloud adoption in the AI area has an enormous benefit. You get the horsepower, you get the technology for innovation that just wasn't available in the past. It's becoming much easier to use. In fact, for us as a company, it's given us the ability to dabble in a little bit of TensorFlow and in voice recognition areas, chat bots, and companies like Amazon and Google have really helped open the industry up for letting ordinary people use extraordinary tools. Some of the areas that we already know about are going to be autonomous vehicles, smart city infrastructure, pandemic response planning. These are just some of the areas that we all know about, where smarter algorithms that run on cloud services are going to become more and more prevalent. I think for the last little while, there's always going to be a steady increase in AI and machine learning. I think there's going to be a steady increase in the adoption in general, and on improving solutions around automation, and especially around effective human interaction. I think the growth in 2021 will come from really something different than we do in our corporate world, and that's the entertainment industry and the gaming industry. I think making movies and having to make them when people are dispersed is going to be something that catches a lot of attention. Gaming obviously it has been growing every year, and I think AI in the gaming industry has got a big part to play. But I do think that the real growth will eventually come when more developers start adopting ML as a specialization and then evangelizing it by incorporating it into their work. That's really when we're going to start to see more mainstream AI application. The next area I think that's important is automation. I think there's going to be a lot more automation coming along the way. And I'm not just talking about, mundane tasks that are done by computers. I'm talking about tasks and behaviors that are done by humans. And in that area, I think the growth in 2021 will be the ability for having tools and software tools, especially in the area where people that don't do automation have the ability now to take those human behaviors and automate them. So to have GUIs and tools available to normal people to be able to automate regular processes, regular behaviors and thus provide for more efficiency in the work environment. It's a growing industry, and I think 2021 is going to have a major impact. I think a lot of people have come across those tools that we already use on our phones called, if a condition happens, then do this type of thing for managing spam, for managing emails, and simple tasks like that. I think we're going to have a bigger growth from an MSP point of view in that area where chatbots are going to come around that are going to remove some of the initial tasks of conversations and interactions with humans better than they're being done today.
Very good.
I've got two more areas that I thought about. One is VoIP and unified communications. 10 years ago, VoIP was being talked about. Today, it's practically a way of life. In 2021, we're going to see a larger exodus of companies using those traditional PBXs. We're seeing it ourselves today. There's a lot of migrations to different cloud platforms, and a lot of them are also to cloud-based VoIP systems. And what the VoIP system allows us to do is to integrate our unified communication platforms like Teams, Slack, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., and to be able to use them consistently amongst everything. In our daily lives, we've transitioned from leaving voicemails and sending messages. I was just sitting the other day and thinking about this, is that I don't think I've left a voicemail in the last 6 months to anybody. I've actually sent them a message. It's not something that it's kind of something we just all transitioned into. And at least internally, I know that at companies, including our company, we've dropped the concept of leaving voicemails and voicemails for reaching out to those people that we don't have direct connections with. And we've adopted sending messages instead. Adopting VoIP gets us to having an easier platform for unified communications from practically anywhere. For example, this morning we were dealing with an issue, and yes, I do technical issues still. One of my support team, he was having an issue. I messaged him. Then I started a chat with him, and the chat wasn't getting anywhere. So in the same app, I called him, and before I called him, I sent him a pic. So now we were, not only just using a technology to transition from one form of communication to the other, but we're using the technology together. So we're collaborating much more effectively and efficiently in that area. Now,
I think maybe if you could wrap up, Montu.
Absolutely.
Great information, but just for sake of time.
Absolutely. So I'm going to wrap up saying that, IoT is something that's ubiquitous around us, and we don't really realize it. There's some amazing stuff coming around with it, especially with areas in medicine, especially with areas of monitoring and management. And we are seeing this in the marketplace. We have companies that we deal with where they're coming around from simple things for logistics and shipping to things like monitoring transformers, where they'll be able to predict failure before it causes a power outage. Anyways, that's my talk for now.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to 2021.
Thank you, Montu.
Sure.
Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Montu hit the vast majority of the items. I'm going to see if I can add some context to it.
I'm sure you can.
I've had the privilege of having literally hundreds of conversations in the last couple of quarters with CIOs and CTOs, CISOs, lots of technology executives. And it's very, very clear that there's been some people-centric trends and some IT-centric trends, and I'll go through a couple. So in the people-centric trends, a lot of this has to do about compassion, right? So it's a compassion about the health and safety of not just your team, but the extended team and the shareholders and the customers and the supply chain, making sure they're getting groceries and they're safe. And that's extended to things like the economy and employment, making sure that people have jobs and a steady income going forward. And of course, they can afford things that they need to do. And then finally, collaboration and communication. We collaborate and communicate differently now because there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at home, and we don't have the personal interaction, right? We're not having conversations in the office, in the water cooler. And we're not having, eye to eye, person to person, in a room conversations. So we have to think about how collaboration and creativity now is different and what technology is in place. On the technological side, I think it's fair to say most CIOs believe that 2021, if not 2022, if not 2023, will look a lot more like today than 2019, or even January through March in 2020, right? There's a long tail of the changes that have been put in place, but they overwhelmingly believe it's been positive. What may have taken them 3 to 5 years now has taken 3 to 5 quarters, right? They've had a pretty significant increase in the IT agility that they've demanded. They have this new work from anywhere, and that has created from, dozens of people to hundreds or thousands of people. So the shift I see are these things. I see work from home being a default, not an exception, right? More people will work at home from the start than anywhere else. And it's not just home, but it's anywhere. It might be your beach resort, it might be your cottage, it might be Starbucks, it doesn't matter. But where I am is where work is, not in the office. And that changes, culturally. Instead of having a single culture, I have a federated culture. You're inviting me into your home, and therefore you get to make the rule. So there's some value there. Value number one is that I can sort of federate the technology and I can have compute at the edge. It's also created a means to look at my talent pool differently. It's not about hiring somebody in a specific city. I can look outside of the city. I can look in the region. I can look at the province. I can look at multiple provinces. I can look in the hemisphere. I now can look at my talent pool much greater than I have before. Second one, agile IT being the only IT. I've gone from 9-month projects to 3-week projects, and that's required me to make some pretty significant technological change. Things like, instead of 3 applications per month to the cloud, I need to migrate and modernize 50 applications to the cloud. I need to consume far more SaaS versions of the products I normally would install and manage in-house. I need to design my data centers to be much more scale out, right? Hyper-converged type technology. Node by node, because there's waves coming at me, waves going up and waves going down. I need to reallocate these resources as necessary. I need automation, and this is where a lot of the AI comes in play. Those 17-step runbooks need to be 2-step. Those CI/CD pipelines need to exist for my legacy applications and my web applications. I need to manage applications across a very diverse infrastructure at the edge, in the core, in the cloud, multi-cloud environments, in SaaS environments. Like, my ability to manage and automate across those entire diverse platforms becomes important. And then finally, I need to consume differently, right? In order for agile IT to work, I need to not have 3, 4-week, 5-week delivery of infrastructure into my data center. I need to consume them in minutes, not unlike cloud, which means I have to think about capacity on demand. I've got to think about managed services that are customized to me. I got to think of as a service infrastructure on site, right? Because I have this sort of diverse complexity. Security, we talked about. So there are more bad guys that are far better at what they do. The emails that are coming to you look very close to being IT. We have hundreds of thousands of people at home who've never received cybersecurity training, right? They're the task workers. They're not the information workers. They're much more likely to believe a phone call at home from IT because a bad guy can't possibly know my home phone number, right? So we've got to think about hardening that edge, hardening that environment to support that newfound way. So some top considerations for a CIO. Leadership is culture, right? Managers by walking around isn't managers in a federated environment, right? I have a technology between us. One-on-ones are different now because I have Zoom in between us. And talent is different. I've got to think about these new complexities of data science and AI. I have far more open roles than I have talent available for them. Therefore, I have to have relationships with the academia side, right? How am I creating that talent? How am I upskilling, reskilling, replacing people in my business? Edge is now primary. So at home, at anywhere is now the place where I'm going to do most of my data consumption and my data creation. So I've got to think about the security of that data, right? How am I keeping it private? How am I governing it? How am I keeping it secure? How am I protecting it? How am I ensure its data lifecycle? In fact, data might be created at the edge, which might be the home or the machine or the branch or the grocery store, and at the data center and in the cloud and in multiple clouds and in my client's environment and in my supplier's environment. And I have to steward all of that complexity over time. So those are the big technology changes I see coming forward.
Fantastic. Tom?
Yeah, thanks for having me on here today, Paul, and Paul, Lewis, and Montu. Those are great overviews. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed your perspectives on them. I could actually talk instead of what I was going to say. I could just talk to what you talked about because it's so interesting. Montu, I had a call just on Friday from Zoom, and they were trying to sell us into their the cloud-based phone system they have.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fantastic. I couldn't believe the features. And I don't want to have a handset on my ear. I want to have a headset so my hands are free. I thought this is fantastic. We're going to, it was a great idea. I never heard of it before. It was great. And Paul, you talk about collaboration in teams and security. And I could go on about that stuff too. And COVID has certainly changed the landscape for everything. So what I'm going to talk about is really the change in security. And I should also say thank you to the audience for hanging in there for for the last guy to talk. But I'm going to talk a little bit about security. And, we've seen that rise of the distributed workforce, and that has changed the landscape dramatically. And remote work, as Paul mentioned, is really now a central part of all business processes. It's here to stay. And people have had to roll it out rapidly. Paul, I was watching a webinar the other day where a fellow he said he was on with one of his big clients, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it was FedEx, and they had tens of thousands of employees. They quickly had to roll out measures for people because there used to be maybe I don't know what it was. I'm going to forget the numbers. So let's say 5% of their workforce used to work from home, maybe one day a week, and now it's 100% of the workforce is working from home every day of the week. Right. And they had to roll this out over a weekend. All of these projects, they had multiple projects and things for remote working. They had to roll them all out. They were all in process in one way or another, but they were able to do it over a weekend. And talk about that agility. It was unbelievable. But it has changed that landscape. And this distributed workforce is different than the workforce we had, say, 10 years ago. We which we used to call remote workforce. I'm going to call this distributed workforce because remote workforce was guys like me on the road. I'm in a hotel room. I got to log into my email. I might do a few little things on my computer, then email it in. Or I can maybe work from home a little if I had to, if I was sick when I would work from home. But instead of employees working remotely, we've now seen an internationalization of the workforce because now you contract people. They could be located anywhere around the world. You could have gig-based workers who just are there for a single contract. And it's all been accelerated by COVID-19. So, we look at that as distributed workforce because now you're taking advantage of different labor zones. And 85% of CIOs or CISOs have said that in order to roll out all of these new remote work initiatives, they've had to sacrifice cybersecurity. And what's happened is our traditional way of doing things has been very based upon a perimeter type defense. Mm-hmm. Or threat-centric defenses. So like you have a firewall, you might have AV software, you have software OS patches roll out rapidly. You might have some training for people against spear phishing and stuff like that. The problem is that they don't work. Okay, breaches are very common. Ransomware is very common. We have one of our technology consultants. He runs a cybersecurity company. He gets 5 to 6 ransomware issues that he has to remediate on the dark web every day from just in Canada. Okay, so It is big. It's way bigger than you think. It's this RCMP pulls him in, the insurance companies pull him in, and the people have to pay. If they're big, they have to pay. They pay in Bitcoin over the dark web. So these things are not 100% effective, and the approach of perimeter-based defenses don't work. And the new where we're going in technology on this is a totally different paradigm. Instead of using a perimeter and assuming that anybody behind the perimeter is okay, like once I'm behind the perimeter, behind the firewall, I'm trusted. I can do anything I want. I can go anywhere I want. Now, obviously, there's some ways of doing some restrictions. For the most part, though, I'm trusted. And the new approach is called zero trust. It's being driven by a number of big companies, of course, and the standards are being set and being driven by the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology called NIST. Okay, and a zero trust is an approach that's exactly what the name says. It's a never trust, always verify every transaction all the time. Okay, so just because you're behind the perimeter doesn't mean that you're not an adversary. And it's instead of having a threat-centric approach, now you bring in a trust-centric approach. And you can think of zero trust like a bank teller. That's a good way I like to explain it. So if you go into a bank today and you want some money, you're not allowed to go into the vault and get it. You got to go up to the bank teller. And the bank teller taps away the computer. They check your ID, or your bank card, to make sure you are who you say you are. They check to make sure you have the money in the account. They make sure that you have the permission to take it out. And then, given all that's okay, then they go back to the vault and they get you the money, and then they bring it to you. They bring it to the teller. And so you have to be verified, and then there's an intermediary there who goes and gets the money for you. And if you leave the bank and come back 10 minutes later, you got to go through the whole process again. Every time you want money, you've got to go through a process. And that's kind of what zero trust is like. Think of it like that bank teller process. The whole idea is to eliminate unauthorized access and make enforcement as granular as possible. And the way that it's done is by building these micro tunnels. Maybe I will go into the technology, but we build little micro tunnels directly to a file or folder. Instead of a VPN directly into a network, which you have today, think of the VPN like a big highway, and you think of a micro tunnel like a little driveway right to the house. Okay, so and you can say, well, is this something that's just a big trendy thing, or is this something real companies are doing? And it is big. Okay, and maybe a lot of people in the audience are already bringing out zero trust initiatives. 2/3 of companies in North America are bringing out zero trust projects right now, and it's up about 300% year over year in terms of companies bringing it in, because they know the old way doesn't work. They got to do something new, especially now people working from home, and 85% of the initiatives just put security by the wayside in order to get these things out rapidly so their workforces can work. So the first thing is zero trust is trust-centric. It's not perimeter based. It's not threat centric. Again, just because you're behind the network does not mean you're not an adversary. And the next thing is transaction based. So you have to verify every user for every device and every app for every single transaction. Okay, so that's the next part of it. It's not just because you're on the network you can do whatever you want. Okay, and then it's very dynamic. So you can adapt policies on a user-by-user basis, on a case-by-case basis, on a file-by-file basis. So I might have a folder, let's say, of accounting information, let's say the financial statements. And I can allow Paul Barker to have access to those files, but he can't download them, okay? But our CFO, he has access and he can download it, he can edit. And you can control it at that level. Or you can say, Montu has no access at all. We don't want Montu in those files. So you can make it very dynamic, very granular, where today it's almost impossible to have that level of control. And you can do that because of the micro channels and the micro tunnels that you put into things, so micro-segmentation storage. And in other words, micro-segmentation means you get down to the smallest level. Instead of a big company, maybe I'll show you that in a second here, if I could. And the last thing is, because you build these tunnels and because you authorize every single request, you can monitor everything. So there's an activity log behind everything that everybody does. And if you have to do any kind of investigation or security audit, then you know what's going on and you can find out what happened. It's always monitored. So maybe
and let's not forget while you're looking up that that there's also going to be a distinct difference between identity and access management versus privileged access management, right?
Yes,
So it's double clicking on who can access what and why, but then who's looking at the people who can make changes to those privileges.
Yeah, right? Today we have PAM. We have PAM access, privileged access management, and basically it's a layer over top of other things. But this is very different. It's very different technology. Maybe if I know we're not, I'm going to just want to just share a slide with you. If it's okay, Paul.
Sure.
Here, if I can bring it up. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. So here's how you have trust zones today. Today you have a VPN that goes into a network trust zone, right? Everybody behind the network is trusted. You can do whatever you want there. For the most part, you can put on privileged access management and stuff, a lot of administration, and how is it? It changes all the time. So what do you do? It may work today. It's going to work 6 months from now, and everything's changed, right? So it's a lot of work to do that in here. The next level is you segment. So now you have a smaller trust zone. It's just one device. And that's zero trust network access. That's what the zero trust solutions are out there today. And then you want to get right down to the zero trust data access, where you can say, no, you're only allowed to access the one file or one folder or two files. And that's all that you can see. And then there your trust is, it can be restricted. It can be view only, or it can be download only, download and view, or maybe I have full editing rights. I can do whatever I want. But that's the idea of bringing in smaller and smaller trust zones. And that's what's happening. It's going to be a big, let's see here if I can, I'm getting in, I have different presentations. I always forget which ones I have open. But yeah, here we go. So the way you do that is you have a server in the middle, and this server, here's how you build microtunnels back and forth between your clients and your storage. Your storage can be on premises. It can be in the cloud with cloud-hosted storage, such as Azure or Amazon, or it can be a data center, or it can be another office, another city. And you build these microtunnels between the client, and you have a connector agent in here. So the client, think of the client like a switchboard operator. He just connects you to the storage you want, the user to the storage. This user goes to just the one piece of storage. And the connector agent is like the bank teller. And the bank teller says, okay, Tom wants to access these financial statements, and they're on the Azure storage. I'll just make the connection, and that's all he can see. He doesn't even know where they are, not necessarily, but he can access them, and he can do whatever he wants. So that's all. I was just going to give you a quick overview to where security is going and how we secure devices on the edge, because this technology is fantastic for edge technology, because these could be storage, they could be machines, they could be in a factory, they could be IoT, it could be anything. It's the whole edge technology behind all that, but it's done through microchannels today. And so today, all your IoT and your edge technology is basically cloud-based. Same with all your access to files is cloud-based, or it can move from cloud-based to anything-based. It can be on premises, it can be remote, it can be in a data center, it can be in a factory, it could be it could be in a factory in another country. You can manage all of it from your tablet or your smartphone. The technology is there. It's coming. It's coming to IoT, and it's there today on the file sharing side of it. And of course, that's what we make. We make the remote file access and sharing software. But I be careful what I say. But obviously, the platform can do a lot more than that. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
It's just a matter of our resources of what we're going to develop first. But it's a fantastic technology, and that's one thing we're going to see security move from, instead of doubling down on perimeter defenses, to moving more and more towards zero trust and a totally different approach to securing data and access and devices.
Thank you.
Let me stop sharing here so you can get back here. There we go.
Well, those are great, gentlemen. Insightful. We have a couple of supplemental questions I'd like to get into. We have referenced IDC and Gartner, and now it's Forrester's turn. It's predicting that AI and machine learning will permeate new use cases and experiences, Forrester says that in 2021, the grittiest of companies will push AI to new frontiers, such as holographic meetings for remote work and on-demand personalized manufacturing. They will gamify strategic planning, build simulations in the boardroom, and move it into intelligent edge experiences, Forrester says. It sounds exciting, but how realistic is it? For time, I'll give each speaker 2 minutes. I know it's not a lot, but you can maybe tackle the question. Excuse me.
Sure.
Sorry, Montu, we'll start with you. My apologies.
Fair enough. My opinion is that AI will play a crucial role in the big stuff, but also in the IoT and edge computing areas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that AI can help with respect to security, which isn't really being tapped into at this particular point in a significant degree. There are applications that are developed, but I consider it like the car industry where there's assistive technology first, and then there's more independent technology coming from it. And so I think the security area of AI is in that area. It's mostly assistive. It's transitioning into more intelligence. And we're seeing a lot of solutions out there with that. But in other areas, simple things like crossing the sidewalk. AI can play a big role in preventing accidents when people aren't paying attention or crossing. I don't mean people who are crossing, but people who are driving as well. And AI can actually provide real benefits in those areas. And I think those are technologies that I've heard of that are in the marketplace and are being developed today. That's my 2 bits on it.
Terrific. Paul?
Sure. So AI, up to now has been a little bit of automation focus and or customer interaction focus, like a chatbot. Automation has some real value in that, I have so many of these individual IT tasks or business tasks to which I need to, do some remote procedure, or I want to move the administrative function over to an engineering function, and I need to use machine learning to appreciate sort of all the data to support how I can automate those tasks go forward. I think that the new go forward AI is much more likely to be human computer interaction, right? So how do I do something safer? How do I do something more automated? How do I do something in a high distance so that a full robotic arm can do the surgery, or drilling can occur on the moon, or that I can have virtual 1,000-person conversations that don't affect the connectivity or bandwidth requirements, because a lot of things are sort of federated around the world. So I think the complexity of the AI will likely be within the data, how we can debias that data, how we can degenderize that data, and then how we can look at the algorithms coming from the academia world and apply that to real world business situations.
Thank you. Tom?
It's interesting. I think we've all been in this panel here. We've been in the technology business for a long time, and technology, it tends to just evolve step by step by step. I think, I used to work for NEC. I was on the global product marketing team, and we not me, but I was on the team that invented the first notebook computer. And it was the first computer that didn't have a power supply internal. It had the power supply external, and it was in a clamshell with no handle. It was the first computer without a handle. And then we thought, well, what are we going to call this computer? So we'll call it a notebook. And it was just an evolution of the laptop before that, which was an evolution of the portable before that, before the evolution of the desktop, which was an evolution of the mini computer. And you see things moving along, and it's the same. We do the same functions. If I looked at Word as it was back then, and Word today it's pretty much the same basic functions as there. When I say AI, it's a technology that's going to improve what we do today and how things are done today in ways that we don't even foresee, but we're already doing it, but we're doing it in a more rudimentary way now with the tools that we have. And later it'll be done much more sophisticated and easier and friendly for us, and better and more accurate. So I see it as just 11 moves of what we've seen over the last 30 years or last 100 years, really. You look at a lot of things we use today, they're just evolutions of what people did 100 years ago, but we do them much better and more efficiently and with better tools. And so you're improving the tools, you're improving the processes with machine learning. You know, think of it for IoT and how can it improve factories. Well, the factories are doing those things today, and you have engineers going in and tweaking things and doing it manually. It's not going to be as good. AI can do it much better and faster and cheaper, but it's going to do what we're already doing in a very rudimentary way, in a long process, and take those and make them very quick and easy and simple. That's where I see it.
That's great. And finally, just to keep, I know we're running a few minutes over. I just want one more question. This has to do with 5G. So the question being, how will 5G change the IT and edge computing landscape? Couple of minutes each, gentlemen, and we'll same order. Montu.
Oh, wow. 5G. From a security point of view, I would hate to have hackers have 5G in their hands. Those DOS attacks and DDoS attacks are going to be worse than they've ever been. I mean, I imagine, you know, if they hacked into 1 million phones and had them all attack the networks, that would be a horrible thing. But 5G is the next evolution, obviously, into the world. And one of the things that I'm going to say is that it's and more efficient capacity, that it's letting the for lack of a better word, older technology to still stay prevalent with things with edge computing. Those devices are available to be able to be more ubiquitous around the world and to grow their footprint. It will allow us to better utilize the networks that we today are having problems with. I think that the technology is the next evolution. I think it still has a ways to go, quite a ways to go. There are fundamentally significant amount of improvements that it brings to the table that shows where this technology is going, and the abilities that it's going to enable with all the devices that we have connected in this world today.
Thank you. Paul?
Other than the consumer value of 5G, I'd argue that 5G is in fact, or will be, the I in IoT, right? It will be the means to which all of those edge devices, whether it be a laptop or a machine or a bulldozer or a crane or a branch or an ATM, will in fact be the connectivity point to the internet in order to collect both the data and distribute and create the applications that are that'll be deployed. And what I think is most likely to occur is not a large community sort of consumer-based 5G implementation. It'll be private implementation of 5G on a campus-by-campus basis. So imagine a educational campus has their own private 5G implementation to communicate between buildings, to communicate between the actual assets and physical devices that are in that campus. Same would be true for a production plant. Same would be true for a distribution in Amazon. Same would be true for any sort of big physical environment where all the assets need to communicate with each other in a private linked 5G environment.
Thank you. Tom?
You guys have got it all nailed down. I used to work for a company that had this philosophy called computers and communications. They were very big in PBX communication equipment, and they're very big in computers, and they're saying someday these are all both going to merge into common technology. Today it's true, we have smartphones. And so where it's really like a little computer and it's merged with your communications with UI and or unified communications and whatnot already there. It's tremendous. What 5G does is it takes that to a whole new level. this merging of computers and communications into really, they're so fast, so quick that things we do today, separate devices that take a long time, all to happen almost instantaneously. And so, who knows where it's going to be 2 or 3 years from now? It's going to be, it's going to be in ways that we don't even foresee. In some ways, consumer side, yes, we're going to be able to download a movie in 2 seconds. So what? I can still download a movie today. I just got to wait a little bit, right? But it's the difference of how it's going to bring in this whole automation and smart cities and smart cars and smart highways and smart factories and things we do today. I drive my car today, but it'd be nice to have a car that I don't have to drive. It'd be nice, and it could do that with 5G and with AI, right? So the technologies are there as they come about, and they're going to take things that we do now and make them way better, way easier, in ways we can't, even for the hackers. I'm on to. Need zero trust for those guys. Yeah.
That's great. Well, clearly there's much to look forward to over the next 12 months and beyond. And I would like to thank Tom, Paul, and Montu for their insights and remind everyone that coverage of this webinar will appear on the ECA site soon. I'll just close by saying stay well and stay safe. And thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care.
You're more than welcome.